The Colts draft class is going to bear a lot of responsibility, and today I'm putting Zach on the hot seat about it. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Just download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. What is up, y'all? It is Jake Arthur and Zach Hicks of HorseshoeHuddle.com. And today we're going to continue our look at the draft, the offseason, and the Colts. We're going to try and put a different wrinkle on it today. I'm going to kind of put Zach on the spot about a few things. So in the first couple segments, we're going to go over some fact or fiction scenarios, some more skewed towards the draft, some skewed about the Colts as a whole. And then in the final segment, it's going to be kind of some either or, would you rather type stuff. So Zach does not know any of these so far. The only indication he's really got is our little free prompts there on the side. So let's get spicy. Let's go ahead. So we're going to start with draft stuff first. So Zach, fact or fiction, if one more starter is not added to the secondary, then the Colts will not make the playoffs.
Oh, okay. So one more starter in the draft in particular here is what we're going with.
Likely through the draft, yes.
Man, there's so many factors go into it, but I think just for the nature of this, I will say fact. If they don't add some sort of starter in this draft to the secondary, I will say the Colts don't make the playoffs. Now, again, there's so many factors that go into this because a lot of it comes down to Anthony Richardson playing and Jonathan Taylor playing and what happens with the guys who started last year in the secondary. But ultimately, I do think they need another guy to maybe not completely start, but at least give them some starter snaps either at corner or safety this next season. So yeah, I will, for the sake of this exercise, say fact there that the Colts need to add some sort of starter, whether it's in this draft or whatever it needs to be to make the playoffs next year.
Yeah, kind of what inspired me on that one is just thinking about the last stretch of the season, losing 3 of the last 5. Particularly, Julian Blackmon not being out there the last couple games. You have some younger and experienced guys stepping in, which causes that big play from CJ Stroud to Nico Collins on the first play in Week 18. All the mismatching with having to throw Ronnie Harrison in there, taking Rodney Thomas out. It's a mess, basically. So if you don't get another starter in there, so I like that. Next up, and this is just going to be a bunch of stuff that fans don't like. So the Colts will add either a defensive tackle or a linebacker in the first 3 rounds.
I'm going to say fiction.
Okay.
I don't think they do. I know that fans, it's Chris Ballard we're talking about here, so it's never out of the question.
Yeah.
But look, he's never taken a defensive tackle in the top 100 in his time with the Colts. He hasn't taken a linebacker that high since Bobby Okereke. Every linebacker he's taken since then I think it's only been the 2. It's been Jordan Glasgow and EJ Speed on day 3.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see him taking a linebacker in the top 100, especially when he just paid for Zaire Franklin. They're still paying dead cap on Shaquille Leonard. And then they have EJ Speeds likely getting a new contract in the next year or so as well. I don't see them taking a linebacker that high. I could see one early day 3, but I think both those positions are more day 3 type looks for them. But I'm going to say fiction. I don't think they take a linebacker or a defensive tackle in the top 100. I know fans are scared of that, though, but I'm trying to help you guys out here. I'm going to say they don't take one that high.
Yeah, I'm going to say that Edgerrin Cooper doesn't move the needle enough for them in round 2, but I do think they'll get an interior defender. I think it's, I don't want to say likely, but I think it's a lot more. I guess it is likely, you could say then. So I do think they could look to add it. They no longer need it. They've added several pieces there, and they have Eric Johnson, they have Adatome. But when you look at some of the guys and how they might fit, you got Mike Hall, Chris Jenkins is another nice piece. Rook Aurora, or here we go. Ohoro.
There you go.
See,
that works for me.
I don't really have to learn that until they draft him on day 2. So, but no, we've talked about some of those guys. And so linebacker, no, I think they're very confident in their ability to draft linebackers on day 3 if they still want to do that for special teams, bare minimum. But I'm going to say they do take an interior defender probably in round 3.
I can't see it, but we'll see. I mean, it's a historically great in terms of athleticism at the defensive tackle position. It's a historically great class with that. So, I mean, I could see Ballard being tempted, but I just don't think it's going to be this draft unless they trade back in the first and get another 3rd round pick. That could happen, but I don't think defensive tackle is going to be the play for him.
And I don't want to sound like I'm just forgetting about recent arguments with like Byron Murphy and at 15 or anything. I don't think it's a terrific thing to do. I just think the belief system of the Colts and building from the inside out, this being a really athletic group, like you said, because I didn't even mention Braden Fisk, it's possible. Pretty possible, yeah. I think. And then let's see, the last one for this segment, the Colts' first selection in the draft will be at 15. Fact or fiction?
Oh, I'm going to say fiction on there. I mean, look, if we know the history of Chris Ballard when it comes to early round draft picks, he is very much a believer of, the analytical mindset of more shots are better than the higher shot, so rather than picking at, what was it in 2018? It was going to be the 3rd overall pick or the 4th overall pick.
They were at 3. Yeah.
3. Yeah. They moved out to number 6. They accumulated all those 2nd round picks from the Jets, and they were able to turn that into productive players like Braden Smith. I believe Shaquille Leonard was in there as well. They were able to turn that into a haul of players that contributed to the team. You look back at, I want to say it was 2019, the next year, they had a 1st round pick with Montez Sweat on the board, but they didn't want to take Sweat. They moved back. Unfortunately, they took Ben Banigou in that same draft, but they also got Michael Pittman Jr. out of the picks that they accumulated there. You even see other top 50 moves. They've traded back in years past, and that's how they acquired Benhart Ryman as well in a trade back to get that 3rd round pick to get Ryman. So he's a very big believer of accumulating assets to get more shots at this. It's a lottery system basically in the draft, if you're going to get lucky or not. So when it comes to pick 15, I think there's 1 or 2 guys he could move up for. I think it's more likely he moves back and just accumulates more assets and adds more young talent to this team. I mean, look, he's a build through the draft type of guy, and you need a lot of draft capital to do that. Him having 7 picks right now in a prime spot to move back at 15, especially with all the offensive tackles that are probably going to be there. I think it's very likely they move back. I think it's a small chance they move up, and then the small chance as well they stay at 15. But I would guess that they're going to move back on draft day. So fact, they're not, or fiction, I think is what the answer was to that one. They're not going to be picking at 15 come draft day.
Same here. There's no way for us to know which blue chip players may still be there, but it's looking less likely that Brock Bowers or Quinyon Mitchell, just a couple of examples, they may not be there at 15. And just again, we hear this every year from the Colts, whether it's on with the next pick or from Ballard himself, like after each day of the draft. There's a hunk of players there that they like. They will move back just far enough to where they don't miss out on all of them. And this is a draft that has a hunk of players they could like: cornerbacks, wide receivers, edge rushers even. So I do think they move back maybe to 20-ish or so, maybe just far enough to get one of the Texas receivers. I think it'll be very appealing for them to move back. Plus, they had 12 draft picks last year. Yeah. They have 7 right now. And what's the fewest that Chris has had? Like, did he have 6 in 1 year? And he'll never go through that again.
Yeah,
like he's always going to go to build up more.
Yeah, I think the real quick point before we move to our next segment here is I think I go back a lot to the year they took Alec Pierce, so 2022. Where they were picking early 2nd round. They had 3 wide receivers that they had in the similar tier, and that was Sky Moore, Alec Pierce, and Tyquan Thornton. So they moved back, and by moving back, they acquired that 3rd round pick that turned into Bernhard Raimann, who looks like their franchise left tackle, and they still got one of the 3 receivers that they wanted, and it turned out to be the best receiver of that bunch. I mean, Pierce, without a doubt, is better than the other 2 wide receivers they had in that bunch. So they're able to win in that sense, getting the best of the three guys that they like there, but they also got their franchise left tackle. And that's what accumulating assets does. I'm not here saying that trading back is always the right option, but that's the way that this front office believes in it. And if they're looking at 15, they're saying, okay, we have 3 wide receivers and 2 pass rushers that we like here. Let's move back to 19 or 20. One of those guys is bound to be there, and we'll get another second or another third or whatever it's going to be. So I would wager that the Colts are going to move back come draft day, accumulate more assets, and go from there. But we'll see. We'll see. Maybe they move up. Maybe they stay at 15. But as of right now, I lean towards a move back on draft day.
Yeah, and obviously we've talked a lot lately about how they've clearly shown that they want to add weapons to the draft, because otherwise they haven't done a ton in free agency from the outside. The outside players they're adding this offseason are coming to the draft, so might as well get more shots at the board. So coming up in the next segment, I'm going to throw more of these at Zach, and they're going to be more specific to the actual Colts already on the roster. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? Go for a run, take a nap, read a book, mow your lawn. Zach and I are in that mode right now. I did mine the other day. He just came in from doing his. Whatever it is, a lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If it was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. Because there's not much more than just kind of lugging around feeling guilty about all the stuff you didn't get done. When you talk to someone, you actually figure out what the real priorities in your life ought to be and what you just think you're supposed to have to do. So going to therapy, going to BetterHelp, that can really kind of help you get your ducks in a row. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, which is great because that means you don't have to go anywhere. You can wear sweatpants or no pants. No one knows about that. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, so we might get a little spicy with some of these, Zach. We'll see what you think. This first one is more hopeful, and I think it's one that everyone really hopes with their entire heart leans one way. So we're going to say, fact or fiction, Anthony Richardson will play the vast majority of the season, and the Colts gamble on their current roster and leaning so heavily into running it back will earn them a playoff spot.
Oh, man, it's another one where there's so many factors that go into this. I mean,
Yeah.
we've seen it in recent years where you could finish at like 10 wins and not make the playoffs, or finish as a 7 seed that way. But, I'm going to be optimistic today. Maybe it's just the vibes I'm in. Maybe I have too much energy from running around mowing in the backyard and I'm just on that high right now. But I'm going to say fact, mainly because I do think that Anthony Richardson is a big difference maker for this offense. I mean, again, you could say whatever you want about them getting lucky in some games or the schedule they played last year, but they almost made the playoffs last year with Gardner Minshew at quarterback. And we saw how brutal that was at times. We saw injuries stack up at key positions and stuff like that. I'm not saying they're not going to stack up next year, but if we get a majority of the season with Anthony Richardson, with Jonathan Taylor back, with hopefully Juju Brents, Braden Smith playing a majority of the season, I do think this Colts team is a playoff team. The problem is, banking on that completely is where we've had most of our concerns this offseason. But I'm going to say fact. I do think Anthony Richardson's going to come back smarter and stronger this next season. I think he's going to build upon what we saw last year, and he's going to put together a fantastic season, because the flashes that we saw last year were top-tier quarterback play, especially in the second half against the Rams and in the first half against the Titans before he went down. We were seeing some really, really good quarterback play, and that was without Jonathan Taylor in the backfield. So what's that going to look like with Taylor back, with maybe his full offensive line, with maybe another weapon in the draft? I do think we're going to see some great things from Anthony Richardson, and I want to be optimistic and say, yeah, that's going to lead them to the playoffs, because good quarterback play can overcome a lot. Regardless of what we say about the secondary right now, having a great quarterback or really good quarterback play can overcome a lot of that. And I think Anthony Richardson can do that if he stays healthy for not even the whole season, just the majority of the season at this point is all we're really asking for.
Yeah, for the sake of being optimistic, I'll say the same. I do think they would have been a playoff team last year with Anthony Richardson. It's obviously like the exact same roster for the most part. And the roster is pretty good. I think if you give Anthony like one more weapon, he's already got decent protection in front of him. And then you just really invest in that defense that can help stop, maybe you hope to contain like CJ Stroud and some of the other potent offenses that you're going to face, but also give the ball back to Anthony. And then hopefully you got kind of a Lamar Jackson Ravens versus Joe Burrow Bengals type of thing. You have an exciting aspect going into the AFC South. So I'll say the Colts will take the necessary picks in the draft to supplement the roster how it is. Now, that doesn't mean it's not going to be real iffy and real shaky in some spots, but we're going to say be optimistic. You can't really predict injuries anyway. So next up, Alec Pierce will quell concerns about needing another starting boundary receiver.
I hope. I'm going to say
Right.
fiction. And I say this as someone who's a big Alec Pierce fan. I think Alec Pierce brings a lot of utility to your offense. And I think as of right now, if he doesn't improve from where he's at right now, it's probably still not worth that second round pick, but he's still a solid NFL player. Like, that's not a bad NFL player. But so far, we haven't really seen enough from him to warrant, him like having the faith in him to quell those concerns, if that makes sense. I think that there is another step he needs to take. I think he needs to be better in his route running. I think he can be more consistent in the opportunities that he does get. But it's going to be a big season for him regardless, even if they bring in a wide receiver at 15 or 20 or wherever, or they don't bring in a receiver at all. It's going to be a big season for Pierce to prove his worth and live up to that value of where the Colts took him in that 2022 NFL draft. But look, I like the floor he brings. I want to see the more of the ceiling. I'm excited for him, but I'm going to say fiction as of right now because we just haven't seen enough from him yet to warrant that kind of hope. And I don't want to be all hope here. I want to be a little realistic and honest with you guys. And I'm going to say fiction for now, but optimistically in my heart, I hope he's able to do it. But from everything we've seen so far, I'm going to say fiction with that one.
Same here. I think he will excel in his role as a downfield weapon. I think he'll be a little more effective than he was previously with Gardner Minshew, because he'll probably get more of those targets downfield. But I just would have needed to see more from him as a well-rounded receiver, doing more underneath and in the intermediate stuff. It's just hard for me to think they wouldn't try to add someone who's a little more complete and well-rounded. But I do think he'll have a rebound season. Like guys like Marquez Valdez-Scantling, like they move around the league. They make big plays. Like there's a spot for those type of guys who are downfield specialists. So just because he's maybe not what they drafted him to be doesn't mean he doesn't have a decent role. So I'm with you. I think fiction, he's still going to be replaceable as that outside wide receiver too, but he's still definitely useful. Next up, the Colts will pick up Kwity Paye's fifth-year option, which they have to do by May 2nd after the draft.
Ooh, that one is depending on so many factors.
Yeah.
Because obviously gun to my head, I think they take an edge rusher in the top 100 picks. I think that they are drafting an edge rusher fairly early in this draft to add competition. So I'm going to go fiction on that for now. Mainly because, again, this is pure speculation. This is not any kind of insider information or anything like that. I think they're going to take an edge rusher from the top 100. They're going to give a year where they're going to have all these guys out there and just see what kind of works and gels together the best. And then they're going to use that information to go from there. Now, that is risky because if Kwity Paye goes off for 12 sacks this year, then you got to pay him an absolute premium the next season when you could have had him on the fifth-year option, which is a little bit more, manageable. But I do think it's what the Colts are going to do with that. Honestly, I wouldn't even be shocked if they take an edge rusher in the top 15, if they end up moving Paye on draft day. But again, that's more speculation here. That's not really anything concrete. But I'm going to say fiction. As of right now, I'm going to lean towards them not picking it up and just playing everything out this next season. But I could see a world where they don't take an edge rusher in the top 100. They pick up that option just to have a steady presence. And then they go into next year with the guys that they have again. But that's a good question. I think that one's really 50-50 for me.
Same here. I'm going to say no also, just because I think you just let it ride. I mean, in a perfect world, would they like both him and Dio back? Sure. But you just let this season go. And then if you have to pick between one or the other, and edge rushers, you have to allocate big cash for those guys. And both Kwity and Dio are ascending young edge players. So you're going to have to give them multi-year deals that are going to cost a big chunk of change. So I think it's going to kind of be a let the best man win. And if you're able to bring both back, great. But also, like you said, they're probably going to draft someone as well, or at least they would like to, you would think.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'm going to say no, but that doesn't mean that they won't bring him back. I think a lot of time when people hear a fifth-year option isn't picked up, that the player's just gone. They're not going to bring him back. I just don't. It's a wait and see year is what it is, essentially. So I agree. I say no on that one.
Yeah. But coming up, guys.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I jumped in. It's my time to talk, Jake. Coming up, we're going to do some would you rathers. And Jake's going to pepper me with some even more questions there. We're going to have some fun in this final segment coming right up. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee. You can stop stressing over tickets and start getting hyped for all the fun that you'll have. Look, guys, I'm wearing an Offspring shirt on here today. I'm always wearing my band shirts. You guys know that I love going to these punk shows and everything like that. And Gametime is the best place to go to get tickets for all these crazy events that I like to go and mosh and all the fun stuff there at these punk shows. So it's and look, Gametime is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. You get images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Look, when I'm going to these punk shows, I need to see what the mosh pit looks like if I'm going to be able to survive in there. I'm getting older, so I can't go in there as long as I used to. So I really have to see the event and the venue before I'm getting these tickets. But look, at Gametime, you can buy tickets in a matter of seconds. 2 taps and you're set. Tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email. Snag the tickets without stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
Speaking of Offspring, Gone Away would be a good description of you and a mosh pit at an Offspring show. But also, yes. Are mosh pits at Offspring shows still a thing? They're getting older too, man.
I'm also pretty fly for a white guy, Jake. That's what
delicious. That's actually all this final segment is going to be.
That's what this whole show is. Pretty fly for a white guy.
All the time. Yeah.
All right. What do you got for me, Jake? What do you got? What's the would you rathers you got for me?
It's the end of the night. We've braided each other's hair. We've had our pillow fights. It's time for would you rather, either or type stuff now. All right. So would you rather the Colts trade up into the top 10, which would obviously cost a lot of draft capital, or trade back to get more capital, but wind up with obviously a player that's not going to be as effective? Like, let's just say A.D. Mitchell, for example. I know he's a little polarizing for you, but that's where he's going to be taken probably, is like the bottom of the first round, talented player. Would you rather have more draft capital in A.D. Mitchell, or like a really, really solid prospect like a Bowers or a Dunze with less capital?
You know, it's funny. I was going to say trade back, and then you put A.D. Mitchell in there for me, and now I'm like, okay, maybe I should trade up. I actually like A.D. Mitchell, but he's just a tough watch for me on film. Traditionally, I am very much a trade back guy. I believe in taking more shots in the draft, acquiring more cheap contracts. I think that's an underrated aspect of trading back, is that you're acquiring more cheap contracts at your disposal for your organization. And look, in today's NFL, you only get like 10 to 15 contracts on your team that are not rookie contracts. A majority of your roster is going to be rookie contracts. So you want more shots at that and more shots at cheap talent on your team, you know, if you're speaking from a GM point of view. So traditionally for me, I would say trade back. And I think in this draft, it's a little bit tighter because I don't love day 2 as much as I would in typical draft years. And I do like Odunze and Bowers quite a bit. But I would still probably lean towards trade back, because for me, you know, getting a guy like an Xavier Worthy, a Donnie Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Jared Verse, if he would be there. I know he's not super far trade back, but a little bit of a trade back. Those are solid players that have a lot of utility and I think can be high upside guys. And then again, I'm getting more shots at everything there on day 2. I think that's a little bit more valuable than me having to move up in round 1 to still take a chance on a player. You know, Odunze and Bowers on paper are very safe players with high floor or high ceilings, but we've seen how the draft goes. You could take a guy first overall and then they bust. And what do? You really struggle to go from there, where if you trade back, you have multiple chances at getting that hit, where if you're trading up, you're giving up all those chances for one player that could still bust. So I think typically I'm all about the trade back, and I think that's where I'd go in this one as well.
All right. So would you rather have Cooper DeJean, who's a very good fit for the Colts, very athletic guy, or Terrion Arnold, who has been CB1 for most of the draft cycle? He's CB1, CB2 for most people.
Yeah, for me, I would lean Terrion Arnold, even though I think DeJean's a better fit in this defense because I love his zone eyes, I love his explosion, I love his playmaking. Cooper DeJean's a guy who would get you 4 to 5 picks a season in this defense. Like it's tailor made for his skill set. But for me, Terrion Arnold is the guy in this class that has that true fluidity that you're looking for at a top corner. It has that true alpha dog mentality at corner. Has that ability to take away number one wide receiver. And when you're looking at what the Colts like to do in their cover three, they like to have one guy they trust in man or press man in particular on that backside. And I don't think that's Cooper DeJean, and I do think that is Terrion Arnold. So for me, it's kind of like asking me, would you rather have a Kenny Moore or Stephon Gilmore? If we're looking at at like 2022 Colts, would you rather have Kenny Moore or Stephon Gilmore? I think this defense needs more of a Stephon Gilmore than a Kenny Moore. So I would rather have Terrion Arnold, even though the DeJean fits a little bit better. Terrion Arnold just gives me more of that lockdown fluidity that I'm looking for in the corner that they kind of need for that room right now.
All right, and I'll give you a couple more of these player either ors. So at 15, Quinion Mitchell or Brian Thomas Jr. You've got this explosive guy you can give to Anthony Richardson, or you can really help solve the issues in the secondary.
Yeah, that one's so tough because I see the Brian Thomas Jr. fit with Anthony Richardson being so seamless and so smooth and just so. Again, it's a long striding outside wide receiver who can get vertical and win the 50-50 balls. I mean, and I think he still has a lot of room to grow. I mean, he's only 21 years old, but when I watch Quinion Mitchell, man, I'm seeing like everything I loved in like JC Horn years ago. I think JC Horn was a better prospect. Like, don't get me wrong. JC Horn was on another level, but I'm seeing that physicality. I'm seeing the explosion, the speed, the fluidity, kind of everything I just mentioned about Terrion Arnold, but you're kind of seeing it even more in a Quinion Mitchell. I think Quinion Mitchell has the potential to be a legit starting corner in this league, a legit Pro Bowl corner. And I'd probably lean Quinion Mitchell just because I think you can get a receiver that works with Anthony Richardson on day 2. I don't know if you can get a Quinion Mitchell level impact on day 2 in this draft. So give me Quinion Mitchell, and I feel really good about this defense going into next year. Whereas if I take Brian Thomas Jr., I'm still feeling very concerned about the defense, even if I'm really excited about that pairing there. But I'm all Quinion. I think I would go Brian Thomas over most other players, but Quinion Mitchell, man, he's so good. He's so fun to watch.
I like it. I like it's maybe not as sexy, but I like that one too. And then this one real quick at 46, they haven't addressed either position yet. Troy Franklin or Tyler Nubin?
Oh, man. Tyler Nubin, I would have said before the testing. The testing. Man, the testing is
from
tough.
what I've heard, like safety doesn't have a lot of like rigid rankings to it too, but like most people have Tyler Nubin, including teams. Apparently, just from listening to people's shows and everything who have talked to teams, Tyler Nubin seems to be most people's safety one.
Yeah. No, I like Tyler Nubin. I like his film a lot, and I think when it comes to not historically bad, but bad testing, you have to weigh the film versus the testing and say, okay, will I bet on this guy being an outlier? And to a degree, I would bet on Nubin being an outlier, being a guy who could overcome that. But I do think Troy Franklin, like say I go Quinion Mitchell at 15. I think Troy Franklin's a very, very good fit for this offense on day 2, to where I'd probably lean Franklin because I get that explosive ability. I get the guy I can use on cheat motions. I get the guy who is productive in a very prolific offense at the college level in Troy Franklin, and also a guy who I think has the potential to do more. I think he was really just pigeonholed as this deep threat, deep crosser type guy in college. I think he can do a little bit more. And I think he, if you're looking for like a Will Fuller type of impact in your offense, you can get that on day 2 with Troy Franklin. I think that's a great fit. So I would go Franklin here. Again, I like Nubin. I probably are looking more for a free safety type though, and Nubin's probably more strong. So I would probably go Troy Franklin here and be pretty happy about that.
Xavier Legette was my original choice. I should have done it.
That would have been tougher. That would have been tougher because
Right.
Legette is a fantastic athlete, but he's not really a vertical threat. So that would have made it
I
very,
know you're
very
scared to
interesting.
get hurt again with that type. So
I am.
that's what originally had me choosing him.
Yeah. All right, guys. I think that's all we have for today. Let us know in the comment section what you would answer to a lot of these. If you would disagree with me, by all means, let us know in the comment section. But before we go, I do want to let you guys know that we had a little thing drop here today, and that is the Indy draft guide is officially dropped. For all you guys that have already received your guide, please let me know in the comment section what you think of it. How much it's changed your life, how it's the greatest thing you've ever purchased, and then let a friend know that you can get the Indy draft guide for $8.99 with code DRAFTMISS, all caps, and you get access to the essential piece of reading for Colts fans both before and after the draft, featuring 225 in-depth scouting reports, features, and much more. Click the link in our show notes to not pre-order anymore, but to order today, because it is available to you guys. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at ZachHicks2, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube where we list your podcasts. We love you guys' ratings and reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here in the beautiful afternoon.